Hello and welcome. My name is Richard Stember. I'm the Executive Director of Science Heads and a volunteer NASA Solar System Ambassador. I want to welcome you to Science Head's 6th online star party. Our focus tonight are the constellations and ancient stories about them. During this event, you're welcome to enter questions at any time into the GoToWebinar question box. We'll do our best to answer all of your questions either during or after the event. And students, please let us know what grade you're in. Before we start, I want to tell you a bit about our organization. Science Heads is a 501c3 nonprofit whose mission is to promote and support STEM education. We host educational events at schools and public venues, and we are also a member of the NASA Museum Alliance. Our volunteers love science, technology, engineering, and math, and if you do too, I invite you to check out our website at scienceheads.org. The NASA Solar System Ambassador Program that I mentioned is run by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. This program trains volunteers to inform the public about NASA missions and related science. I'm just one of the more than 1,000 ambassadors who volunteered for this program. And tonight, I'm pleased to be joined by another ambassador, Cheyenne Smith from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Cheyenne has a BA in journalism and mass communications with a focus on public relations. She has a passion for both astronomy and the arts, and she is currently doing her graduate work in archaeoastronomy at the University of Oklahoma. And again, my name is Richard Stember. I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry. I'm an entrepreneur and an avid amateur astronomer. I love sharing astronomy with the public, and back in 2014, I founded Science Head so I could do just that. Hello, Cheyenne. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Thank you so much, Richard, for that introduction and for having me. I'm so excited to tell you more about ancient stories of the constellations that we picked out for tonight. There's so many versions of these stories you'll be hearing tonight throughout different cultures, but also various interpretations deciphered by archaeologists. But for those who are not familiar with constellations, Richard, can you start out by telling us what are constellations?
Sure, I'd be happy to. On this picture here, Cheyenne, we see the Milky Way, and it's really hard to imagine, but even just 1,000 years ago, this is what people would normally see when they stepped outside at night. They would see the Milky Way, as beautiful as this looks. We rarely get to see the Milky Way here in Southern California and most parts of the country because the skies are just too light polluted. The cities throw out a lot of light, street lights point light upwards, and it really blocks out a lot of our view of the Milky Way. Well, thousands of years ago, people really did not understand what these points of light were in the sky. They didn't correlate them to, our sun. They didn't realize that these are all stars, suns that are, far away. But they did notice that they moved together across the sky. Just like the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, so too do the stars move together as a group across the night sky. So to help them learn where the stars are located and to help them understand their world, they started giving them names, and they gave the patterns of the stars names as well. And to help remember them, they created stories that we still know some of, today. And I'm hoping that you're going to be able to share some really interesting stories with us.
Yes. So how many patterns or constellations would you say there are?
There are actually 88 officially recognized constellations in the sky.
The patterns of the constellations seem to have been very important to ancient peoples. Why did people identify the constellations?
So they use the night sky to help them in their everyday lives. I'll give you an example. The ancient Egyptians, for example, 3,000 years ago, most of their agriculture was all around the Nile River. And once a year, the Nile would flood. It would happen middle of August, typically. Well, some astronomer back then realized that when a particular star, the star Sirius in the constellation Orion, rises just before the sun does from that location, it predicts when the flooding will start. So it was a very useful way of keeping track of what's going to happen for their agriculture. And there's other examples of that as well in ancient history.
I'm sure we've all probably heard about the zodiac. Can you talk more about what is the zodiac and its constellations?
Sure, I'd be happy to. There's 12 signs of the zodiac, constellations. And I'm going to grab my globe here to help explain just what the zodiac is and how it works. You see, this globe actually has a miniature Earth in the middle of it, and it's surrounded by a hard plastic, clear plastic globe. And on that clear plastic globe, I have all 88 constellations marked out with yellow dots. And if we look closely here, we can see also there's a little sun there. And because the Earth orbits around the sun, and because it orbits with its axis slightly tilted, as we see here, the sun will be in different positions in different parts of the year. And I mentioned there's 12 zodiacal constellations. We talk about, or astrologers talk about the sun being in a particular constellation. That means that's the constellation that rises at the same time that the sun rises. In the morning when the sun rises, if we were able to magically turn it off, flip a switch so the sun turns off, we would actually see constellations behind it. Right now, the constellation we would see is the constellation Libra. So the sun is currently in the constellation Libra. And that's what the signs of the zodiac are about, the constellations that are rising at the same time that the sun is rising.
Okay, thank you so much, Richard, for answering my questions. I have one more before we get started on the storytelling. How do I find the constellations?
Well, that's my job tonight, to introduce to you how to find the constellations and show you how easy it really is. So I've got some hints, some suggestions for you. This is going to be a lot of fun. It's kind of like learning how to read a map of the sky. First suggestion is to plan ahead. Before you even go outside, use some software on your computer or your cell phone to look at the night sky, what you expect to see. This type of software is called Planetarium software, and there's plenty of free software out there that you can download for both PCs and Macs, as well as cell phones. And I've listed a number of free ones here. So the first thing to do is plan ahead. Decide what constellations you're going to hunt down that night. On the next slide here, I've got some other suggestions for you, some handy tips. When you go outside, first thing you do, turn off all the lights. You don't want to be fighting any more light pollution than you need to. Here in Southern California, we don't see a lot of stars because of all the light pollution from the cities and the street lights and other light sources. Turn them off. And then be a little bit patient. Let your eyes adapt to the darkness. It takes about 10 or 15 minutes, and you'll be amazed at how much more you will see, how well your seeing gets by allowing your eyes to adapt. Now, there's two other things that I'm going to suggest that you get. This is not absolutely mandatory, but it makes it a lot easier. One is get one of these. It's called a planisphere. And you could buy these on Amazon for about $10. And I'll show you how to use one of these in just a minute. Notice that it has the star patterns, the constellations on them. It has a wheel that you can turn, and I'll show you how to use that in just a moment. The other thing to get, and it makes it a lot easier to read the planisphere when you're outside, get one of these red flashlights. Costs about $5. Red light won't ruin your night adaptation. Your eyes will still be night adapted if you're using a red flashlight, and this will help you read that planisphere. So pick those two things up, and then you've got everything that you need to start hunting down the constellations. Two more hints for you, Cheyenne. Look for simple star patterns. Forget about the animals. Forget about the people. Forget about all those figures. They're impossible to find. But if you just pay attention to the simple star patterns that are within each constellation, you'll be able to find it really easily. The last hint I'm going to give you is particularly useful for light polluted skies, and that is use what we call averted vision. It turns out when you're outside in the darkness and you look straight at something, you won't be able to see it as well as if you looked a little bit to the left and looked a little bit to the right. It turns out that the light sensor cells in the back of your eye, your retina, the ones on the side of your eye are much more sensitive to low light conditions. The ones in the center of your eye are really good for color, but not good for dark conditions. So if you avert your eyes, turn to the left or turn to the right a little bit, look away from the object that you're trying to see, you'll actually see that star a little bit better. And there's plenty of dim stars out there that you'll want to see. Let's talk about that planisphere for a minute, Cheyenne. 3 steps for using a planisphere. 1, when you buy a planisphere, make sure it's for the right latitude. It's generally just 2 or 3 latitudes, and on Amazon you're going to find mostly the ones that are designed for North America, which are the 30 degree to 40 degree latitudes. Here in Southern California, we're about 33 degrees latitude. That's well within the range of this planisphere that I have for my purposes. So just make sure it's for your latitudes. Then, number 2, dial the observing time to match the date and time. So if we, let me pull out my pen here. If we're outside observing at 8 p.m., you'll want to turn the dial so the date and month line up with that time. And then when you look at the main part of the planisphere, you'll see all the constellations that are currently up at that time in your area. And then it's simply a matter of facing the direction that you want to look. So here we can see on the blue horizon, we can see north. So if we face north and look up, we'll see the Big Dipper. We'll see the Little Dipper. We'll see other constellations as indicated on the planisphere. And we'll practice this in just a minute with some Planetarium software screenshots that I've got for you.
Before, we had a question about where did you get the planisphere from, the globe?
Well, the planisphere I got from Amazon. So if you just do a search for planisphere, you'll find a number of them. Some big ones, some small ones. My eyesight is not so good anymore because I'm getting up there in age. So I like to use the big ones, which are easier to read. Matter of fact, I even have a watch with a planisphere built into it, which is pretty cool too. The globe that I showed you earlier, if you go to an educational supply website, they'll probably sell these. Other science websites sell those as well. So thank you for that question. Hey, Cheyenne, let's find our first constellation tonight. Now, just about everybody knows the Big Dipper. It's really easy to find in the sky. You simply look in the northwest part of the sky, and you're going to see the Big Dipper. Well, it turns out the Big Dipper is part of the first constellation we're going to talk about tonight, Ursa Major, which is Latin for Great Bear, Big Bear. Well, there I've circled the Big Dipper for you. It looks like a ladle or a spoon, a square spoon, really easy to find, and it is part of the constellation Ursa Major. And Ursa Major, as I mentioned, is the Great Bear. The Planetarium software that I like to use, called K-Stars, again, one of those free applications you can download, shows some nice pictures. There's the Great Bear. and that is the representation, an ancient representation of that particular constellation. Hey, Cheyenne, what stories can you tell us about the Big Dipper and Ursa Major?
Yes, so as mentioned before, bears are a recurring theme that runs through mythology as it conveys the kinship between bears and humans. There have been many oratories and star lores written about beings taking the form of bears. In some cultures, bears are regarded as influential deities. So as Ursa Major travels throughout the heavens, it constantly changes from quadrupedal to bipedal positions, as if it was running along on all fours nearest the horizon, and then rising to its hind feet to begin ascending back into the sky. So these orientations in the sky resemble a bear's movement as it walks on four legs or stands up on its hind feet and gestures with its front paws. The Iroquois and the Mi'kmaq indigenous peoples of North America share a story about a big bear and the hunters pursuing it. In this story, the quadrangle of the Dipper represents a bear that is pursued by 7 hunters. The 3 closest hunters are the handle of the Dipper. As autumn approaches, the 4 farthest hunters dip below the horizon and abandon the hunt, leaving the closest 3 hunters to chase the bear. The hunters are all named after birds. The closest hunter to the bear is named Robin, the second closest is Chickadee, and the third is Moosebird. Chickadee is carrying the pot in which the bear will be cooked. The second star in the handle is actually 2 stars, the famous double star system called Mizar and Alcor, which represent Chickadee in the pot. In autumn, as the bear attempts to stand up on 2 legs, Robin wounds the bear with an arrow. The wounded bear sprays blood on Robin, who shakes the blood off himself and in the process colors the leaves of the forest red. As some of the blood stains Robin, he becomes known as Robin Redbreast. The bear is eaten and the skeleton remains traveling through the sky on its back during winter. During the following spring, a new bear leaves the den and the eternal hunt resumes once more. So Richard, I have another story of Ursa Major that I like to share, but this one is from the ancient Maya. It's a story of a narcissistic deity, Seven Macaw, and the heroic twin brothers. In Mayan mythology, Seven Macaw was a large bird with a serpent entity sprouting from its head. It is thought that the 7 vertebrae of the serpent may represent the 7 stars of the Big Dipper. Seven Macaw dwelled on the surface of the world after the flood. He was very vain and proclaimed himself the sun and moon, the lord over everything. According to a book entitled Papavu, the story goes as such. When there was just a trace of early dawn on the face of the earth, there was no sun, but there was one who magnified himself. Seven Macaw was his name. The sky and earth was already there, but the face of the sun and the moon was clouded over. Even so, it was said that his light provided a sign for the people who were flooded. He was like a person of genius in his being. I am great. My place is no higher than that of the human work, the human design. I am their sun and I am their light and I am also their months. So be it. My light is great. I am the walkway and I am the foothold of the people. Because my eyes are of metal, my teeth just glitter with jewels and turquoise as well. They stand out blue with stones like the face of the sky. And this nose of mine shines white into the distance like the moon. Since my nest is metal, it lights up the face of the earth. When I come forth before my nest, I am like the sun and moon for those who are born in the light, begotten in the light. It must be so because my face reaches into the distance, says Seven Macaw. The hero twins were angered by this proclamation and decided to slay the monster bird. In order to accomplish this, the twins hid under the bird's favorite tree and waited with their blowguns for him to arrive. When he did, one twin brother shot him in the face, and Seven Macaw became enraged and ripped off the twin's arm and then escaped. The hero twins then convinced an old couple to pose as healers and visit the bird, offering to cure his eyes and teeth. The old couple tricked the bird by telling him that in order to cure him, they needed to replace his eyes and teeth. When he agreed, they substituted grains of corn for his teeth and eyes. After that, Seven Macaw lost his power and quickly died, leaving Seven Macaw's wife, Ursa Minor, all alone. What do you think about that story, Richard?
Well, I got to tell you, those Mayans have an incredible imagination, don't they?
Yes, they did.
Hey, talk about Ursa Minor. Let's take a look at that constellation. That's also a very familiar constellation to a lot of people. It's often referred to as the Little Dipper, and it's really easy to find if you can find the Big Dipper. Although the stars in Ursa Minor are pretty dim, one of them is a very special star, a star that everybody knows about, the North Star, or Polaris. But it's not a very bright star, surprisingly. Now, Ursa Minor, as the Latin indicates, is small bear. And here's Ursa Minor circled. That's the Little Dipper you see there. And to find it, if we just look at the end stars of the Big Dipper, they point the way to Polaris, which is the end star of the Little Dipper. So it's a great way of finding the North Star and finding north. In fact, hunters know this, and people who go out at night on a hike know this. If you ever get lost, just look for the Big Dipper, find your way to Polaris, and you'll know which way is north. And if you know which way is north, you know which way is east, south, and west. You don't need a compass at night. All you need is a clear sky. Hey, that's a picture from K-Stars of a little bear. Doesn't look like a little bear to me. It looks more like a fox. Do you have a good story to tell us about about Ursa Minor, Cheyenne?
Yes, so for centuries, this has been one of the most important constellations, as you mentioned before, for navigation, as it includes the pole star Polaris. But at the height of Egyptian culture 4,000 years ago, the star Thuban in the constellation Draco marked the North Pole, and the stars of Ursa Minor were relatively little of importance. At this time, these stars were considered to be part of a Draco and formed an asterism known as the dragon's wing. So the ancient Greeks knew these stars by a variety of names and associated them with many different myths. In some early accounts, these stars represent the nymphs who tended Hera's garden, where the dragon Ladin kept watch over the golden apples. Later, they came to be associated primarily with two stories. In one, the stars represent Callisto's son, Arcas, transformed into a bear and hoisted into the heavens along with his mother. I can never say his name right, but Bootes is said to be Arcas' son of Zeus and Callisto. Callisto was transformed into a bear by Zeus's jealous wife Hera. When Arcas was hunting, he spotted the bear and gave chase, not knowing she was his mother. Zeus rescued Callisto by lifting her into the stars, where she became Ursa Major. Later, Arcas was also placed there to guard his mother and herd her around the celestial pole. That, Richard, is one out of the few stories about Ursa Minor and one out of few Greek oratories we'll be discussing tonight.
Oh, good. I can hardly wait to hear the others. Here's another constellation, one of my favorites, Cassiopeia. Also really easy to find in the northern sky. It's actually up year-round. It's one of the few constellations that remain above the horizon where we live here. And Cassiopeia is a queen. It makes the shape of a W, so that's the pattern you want to look for. Look for a W in the northern sky. It's above Ursa Minor, or the Little Dipper. And here's a picture of a queen sitting on her throne, I think, and she's looking at a mirror, believe it or not. What do the Greeks have to say about Cassiopeia, Cheyenne?
Yeah, so as you mentioned before, Cassiopeia was the mythical queen of Joppa, famous for her vanity. Wife of King Cepheus and the mother of Andromeda, Cassiopeia once claimed that she and her daughter were more beautiful than any of the sea nymphs that accompanied the sea god Poseidon's court. The sea nymphs complained to Poseidon, who punished Cassiopeia, sending a sea monster, Cetus, to ravage the coast of Joppa. Cassiopeia and Cepheus consulted the oracle, who told them that they had to sacrifice their beloved daughter to the monster to save their kingdom. Reluctantly, Cassiopeia and Cepheus had Andromeda chained to the rock on the coast in sacrifice. She was saved from Cetus by the hero Perseus, who slew the monster and then took Andromeda's hand in marriage. Poseidon placed Cassiopeia in the sky, but in the most undignified pose. Cassiopeia is said to be seated in her throne, but she rotates headfirst about the pole star, upside down half of the time, an eternal punishment for her vanity. All of the other main characters in this legend are also immortalized. Richard, will you start by telling us a little more about Perseus?
I sure will. Let's take a look at the constellation Perseus. Perseus, you got to say, you got to love Perseus, and you got to love the Greeks. This is a great story you're going to tell us, I'm sure. Perseus is a Greek warrior, and he is legendary for the things that he did. The constellation is actually very large. It's adjacent to Cassiopeia, as you mentioned. Here I've circled the constellation. Don't try to figure out where there's a man or a Greek warrior in this constellation. I tell you, you're not going to find it. But look for the star pattern of that the kind of two legs that go out there, maybe a stick figure. That's the constellation Perseus. And here's what K-Stars displays as an image. I think we probably have an even better image of the of Perseus. To find it, just go right from Cassiopeia. It's going to be right there. And again, just look for those fingers in the sky. That's the pattern you want to look for. What can you tell us about Perseus, Cheyenne?
Yes, so according to legend, Perseus began his life of adventure to defend his mother Danae from the unwanted advances of King Polydectes. The king offered to find a different bride if Perseus brought him the head of the Gorgon Medusa. Medusa was one of the mortal of the three Gorgons, sisters so ugly that any mortal who looked at them would be turned to stone. Polydectes assumed that Perseus would die in the attempt, allowing him to court Danae. And I think you can see him holding Medusa's head right there in the constellation. Yeah, try not to look for it because it's like Richard said, it's pretty difficult.
We're supposed to avert our eyes, aren't we? We turn to stone and we look at it.
To Polydectes' dismay, Perseus succeeded with the help of the gods. Flying on the winged sandals of Hermes, Perseus used the shield of Athena as a mirror to avert his gaze as he crept up on the sleeping Medusa and cut off her head. The winged horse Pegasus arose when Medusa's blood dripped into the ocean. Perseus mounted the steed and fled Medusa's immortal sisters. On his way, Perseus came upon Andromeda and rescued her, winning her hand in marriage. And being born from a Gorgon's blood is quite uncanny, but it makes for a great metaphorical story. Well, Richard, that's all the Greek gore that I have for tonight.
This is a family session anyway, isn't it? So we got to.
Yeah, I'm glad it's a little lighter.
Well, I tell you, Cheyenne, if I wish I was trick-or-treating this year because I know what costume I would put together. I would love to be Perseus.
Yeah, or I think it'll be hard to put a Medusa costume together, but yeah, it'll be very interesting to see.
I'll take some pictures if I do it. We have a good question here from one of our guests. They're asking, what is the difference between an asterism and a constellation? And that's a really good question. So an asterism generally is a small group of stars which aren't officially a constellation. Remember I mentioned in the introduction, I believe you asked me, Cheyenne, how many constellations there are. There's 88 officially recognized constellations. There's actually an international organization of astronomers who decide what's a constellation and what's not, believe it or not. An asterism a good example of an asterism would be the Big Dipper. It of itself is not a constellation, It happens to be part of a constellation, but it's what we would call an asterism. Another one would be the Pleiades, the Seven Sisters. That's an asterism. So thank you for that question. That's a really good question. Talking about getting back to Perseus and the blood of Medusa, I'm not going to let you off the hook just yet, Cheyenne, because a really cool constellation right next to Perseus is this horse, Pegasus. And it is a big constellation. It's even bigger than Andromeda is, but it's pretty easy to find. Again, don't look for a horse. You're not going to find it. Look, in this case, look for a giant square in the sky. It's actually pretty big. We're not talking small square. We're talking big square in the sky. And at this time of year from Southern California, it's almost overhead. So if you go from Cassiopeia, go east from Cassiopeia, you're going to find Pegasus. And there's one illustration of the horse. I have a feeling you have a little bit more to tell us about Pegasus, though, don't you, Cheyenne?
Yes, I do. How can I talk about Perseus and not talk about Pegasus? Yes, I have a great story. So in Greek mythology, Pegasus was the son of Poseidon and the mortal of Medusa. And in her youth, Medusa was famed for her beauty and especially renowned for her hair. As a young woman, she was seduced in the temple of Athena by Poseidon, the god of the sea and the god of horses. As punishment for her lack of chastity in the temple, Athena condemned Medusa to a life of gruesome ugliness. From that point on, her face was covered with dragon scales, her hands were made of brass, and she grew snakes for her hair. Her appearance was so hideous that any mortal who looked at her was turned to stone. The hero Perseus slew Medusa while she slept by cutting off her head. As her head rolled to the ground, Pegasus sprang from her blood. After his unusual death, Pegasus flew up to the heavens where he became the thundering steed who carried Zeus's lightning bolts. The constellation of Pegasus represents only the front quarters of the horse, seen upside down. One modern mythologist suggests that Pegasus was placed in the stars whole, but that his hindquarters later fell to Earth, where they became the patron of politicians.
Who wouldn't love to have a winged horse? I'm very jealous of Perseus.
I know. I used to, of course, love the Disney version of Hercules.
I grew up watching those horrible B-rated movies about Hercules and the Argonauts, and what great stories they were. I thought they were great stories. Well, we've shared what about 5 constellations, which are really easy to find. And if our guests get a hold of one of those planispheres, they're going to discover a whole world to explore of different constellations. And it's not hard to do. Just with a little bit of planning, think about what pattern of stars you want to look for and dial that planisphere to the right day and time. And it's not going to be hard to find at all. But we got something else to talk about, I think, Cheyenne. And that's the Milky Way itself. There was a lot of stories just about the Milky Way, weren't there?
Yes. So the Milky Way galaxy, it played a prominent role in various cultures throughout history. Ancient sky watchers saw the Milky Way in similar ways. In ancient Mayan civilization, it was a mystic road that led to the gateway of different realms, such as the underworld. The Milky Way was also considered the Nile of the sky in ancient Egypt, which was described as a waterway that led to the heavens. The people of ancient China believed it to be a celestial river that flowed into the sky and another gateway to the heavens. These patterns and oratories of great beings in the sky transcend generations over thousands of years. As Richard mentioned earlier, tracking the orientation of the sky assisted these civilizations with timekeeping for agricultural purposes, but even more had religious and ritual significance associated with them. It's fascinating to think of the influence the sky had on our ancient ancestors and how star-obsessed they were given the absence of the light pollution. So here's a TikTok challenge. When you're out stargazing one night, try looking to see if you can picture some of the patterns as the ancient people did. I know it's difficult, but with a little imagination, maybe you can get somewhere. Or make up your own stories about what you see in the sky, because we would love to hear it. I think you're on mute, Richard.
Thank you, Cheyenne. Yeah, that'd be great if people could submit some stories that they made up. I would love to hear those stories. Well, this has been a lot of fun, Cheyenne. We had a lot of fun sharing the constellations with you and these stories, and we invite you to go outside. It's nice and dark, and it's I believe, a clear night tonight. So why not get started right away? Now, I do have some resources to share with you. Remember that Planetarium software we talked about, help you plan your visit outside. Well, here are links to all of the free applications that I mentioned, as well as for your iPhone or Android phone, you can go to either the Apple Store or Google Play Store and download the applications that I shared with you. Those are great choices for you. Again, you can pick up one of these at Amazon, or a camera store very often carries them as well. If you're going to a camera store, I recommend using this outside instead of your cell phone. Why? Because a cell phone gives off a lot of light, and it'll take away from your night vision. You don't want to ruin that wonderful night vision that you developed after 15 minutes of standing in the dark. Also want to mention, we've got another star party coming up on November 6th, using binoculars for astronomy, which is actually a great follow-up to this particular star party, because knowing where the constellations are is an immense help finding some beautiful objects in the sky. Objects like globular clusters and open clusters, nebulas, and even galaxies that you can see with a nice set of binoculars. If you know where the constellations are, I can show you how to find those wonderful objects in an inexpensive pair of binoculars. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So be sure to register at scienceheads.org. If you download the slides from this presentation, you'll find references for all of the illustrations and the books that we used to research today's presentation. I want to thank you for joining us tonight. I had a lot of fun doing this. Cheyenne, I know you had a lot of fun as well. I hope our guests did also, and I hope they join us for our next star party. Thank you again, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night.